Namaskar. A tableau celebrating the death of former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi went around the town of Brampton in Canada at a parade that was organized by Khalistani sympathizers on June the 4th. Now, this parade was organized in the run up to the 39th anniversary, 39th year since the Operation Blue Star was conducted. Now, obviously, such a move was universally condemned and criticized, again, by both sides of the political spectrum in India. This has, in fact, also led to the Canadian High Commissioner in India now, issuing an apology and expressing regret at these turn of events. In this video, we seek to understand what exactly happened in Brampton on June the 4th, what is the cause of this whole issue, what are the ramifications of it, as well as what does this mean in the longer run for India-Canada relationship. Hello and welcome to StudyIQ IAS English. My name is Bhuvan Apurvacha. As let's kick off this video first with the reactions that followed after this particular tableau was depicted and videos of it went viral on the social media. Straight away, we had the Foreign Minister of India, the External Affairs Minister of India, Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar, who in fact says that, well, I think there is a bigger issue involved. Frankly, we are at loss to understand, other than the requirements of vote bank politics, why anybody would do this. In fact, criticizing Canada and their complicity in this whole fanning of what could be perceived to be religious extremism. He goes on to say that there is a larger underlying issue about the space which is given to separatists, to extremists, to people who advocate violence. This is not good for relationships and not good for Canada. Essentially issuing an ultimatum of sorts or pointing to a direction wherein this could become a factor in the bilateral relationship between India and Canada. At the same time, you had a member from the Congress party, the principal opposition party in India, that said, and a member of the parliament from that party, Milind Deora, saying that as an Indian, he is appalled by the 5-kilometer-long parade which took place in the city of Brampton. It's not about taking sides, it's about respect for a nation's history and the pain caused by its Prime Minister's assassination. Indeed, when this whole video went viral, it drew sharp criticism and retorts from across the political aisle in India. And at the same time, you have had Canadian lawmakers now who have in fact come out and criticized Canadian silence on this perceived ghastly tableau that was showcased in the run-up to the 39th Operation Blue Star anniversary. Going forward now, let's look at the Khalistan movement. Now, this has obviously been the key point when it comes to India and Canada. Now, obviously, why is the Khalistan movement important? What is the Khalistan movement? First up, it's a separatist movement for creating an ethno-religious sovereign state. So this movement is essentially about seceding from the Union of India, forming a completely autonomous, independent state outside the realm of the domain of Indian Republic. And so this has seen its growth right since the pre-independent days. We will discuss the timeline of this whole issue. But at the moment, it is important for us to consider this particular fact here. The proposed boundaries of the proposed Khalistan, well, that is unclear. What essentially has happened is, if you look at this map here, the proposed Republic of Khalistan that has been released by the sympathizers of this cause, you essentially see that the whole area belongs to present-day Punjab, Himachal Pradesh, down up till Rajasthan. For some reason, Lahore has been left out. Lahore, which was the capital of the historic Sikh empire under Maharaja Ranjit Singh, well, one would imagine that it to be the natural capital for such a state, if at all it were to be created. However, for some curious reason, you don't find Lahore being mentioned in the conversation at all. Which is why the proposed boundaries of this are unclear. What was the original proposal for the boundary or the original concept of the Khalistan state, the areas that it involved, areas of Multan in Pakistan, well, they don't include in the current day conversation. Again, I'm curious to know why. So when we go back in history, what we look at is that the first pamphlet calling for the separate Sikh state came in the year 1940, coinciding with the fall of the British Empire. In fact, you had the Akali Dal chief, Master Tara Singh, who advocated for an Azad Punjab. And that was essentially to do with areas that belong in present-day Pakistan. However, the current scope of this movement is vastly different from the original scope as what it was mooted. Why? Well, again, you will understand why I'm hinting to this. Because in the past, you have had Sikh separatist leaders who have claimed that the then Pakistani Prime Minister Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, he promised unconditional and complete support for the creation of Khalistan during the India-Pakistan 97 war. Which is why now it makes sense as to why the present-day Khalistani cause, the present-day Khalistan sympathizers, don't include Lahore in their plans, in their maps at all. Yearly demonstrations occur in protest of those killed during Operation Blue Star, wherein Sikh extremists had were located in the Golden Temple in Amritsar, and Indian Army carried out offensive action leading to the elimination of the extremists. Now, this is obviously a pain point for the Sikh community. The desecration, the entry of an army force in the most sacred of the shrines. So this has obviously become an issue that has to be addressed comprehensively, that was addressed and that is still being addressed comprehensively. However, this is used by the adversaries of India to essentially further their own narrow ideological interests. Now let's go forward and have a look at the relationship of Canada and Khalistan. Now this is not a relationship that is recent. When you go back in history, you look at the fact that even during Srimati Indira Gandhi's time, you had the then Prime Minister of Canada who had the same accusations as the present Prime Minister of today, that they are very soft when it comes to religious extremism. So when you go back in history, you look at it that, well, again, like I told you, not the first time that Canada has turned a blind eye to extremism in its territory. Good evening. Welcome to the stream. So in 2002, you have a particular journal, a magazine called Sanj Savera. Now, a Punjabi language weekly, like I told you, it ran a cover story celebrating Indira Gandhi's assassination with a cover profile. The same magazine again in 2003 runs another cover profile capturing the assassination of former Chief of Army Staff General Arun Sridhar Vaidya. Now obviously this should have become an issue, should have been dealt with right at the very nascency of it. However, again, for some curious reason, we find that the weekly publication received Canadian government support through advertisements. Currently, it is one of the major leading weeklies, the weeklies across language segments in Canada. Again, a large part of that has to do with active Canadian support through advertisements. Canada also set free the lone person convicted for the 1985 bombing of Air India Flight 182, the Kanishka bombing case that we know as, in which around 330 people were killed. Again, Canada letting go of the sole person they had in custody. All of this obviously would leave one to imagine as to why Canada is so soft on this particular issue. How are their hands tied? We will seek to understand as we go forward in this video. Again, if you're liking this analysis, if you're liking this discussion, well, do consider joining me on my official Telegram channel. All you need to do is scan this barcode and you will be added to my Telegram channel where I discuss a lot of current affairs, lot of international relations, lot of information that will benefit any aspirant for any examination or any student who likes to be updated with current affairs. Do consider joining. I'll see you in my official Telegram group. Now, going forward and carrying forward this discussion now, so after we have discussed the Canada-Khalistan relationship, let's quickly understand a couple further factors too. Now, we need to be aware of these two entities, Sikh for Justice and this particular individual. So, secessionist group that campaigns for the secession of Punjab from India, Well, I'm talking about Sikh for Justice. Organization created, like I told you, after the 1984 Sikh riots. After the former Prime Minister was assassinated by his Sikh bodyguards, there was an anti-Sikh riot that took place. Large amounts of innocent people, many people, innocent individuals' lives were lost, property was lost, and a wound was created that is possibly healing and has healed to a certain extent over a large period of time. However, is continuously and constantly misused by India's adversaries to make it a pain point for India. So India has banned the Sikh for Justice, this particular organization, in 2019 under the UAPA Act. So it has been classified as an unlawful organization. And why is it unlawful? Because essentially what they did was campaign for secession of Punjab from India. So this is the referendum that they in fact carried out to a large extent in Canada. Again, Indian government lodged strong protest with the Canadian government. However, not too much avail. It didn't do much difference to the Canadians as far as their actions were concerned. Thereafter, we will talk about Gurpatwant Singh Pannu. He is the legal advisor, as he likes to call himself, of the Sikh for Justice organization. When he's not making badly edited videos, he is looking at filing lawsuits across different courts in the West against individuals in India, and also threatening India, threatening India's interests, talking about disruptions during Independence Day, Republic Day. He is essentially, again, a designated terrorist in India who has not been seen in the Indian borders for a long time, essentially staying put towards that part of the world. He was declared as a designated terrorist. His agricultural land was attached under the section of the UAPA Act. India also lodged a request with the Interpol to issue a red corner notice against this particular individual, GS Pannu. However, Interpol rejected that particular request, and the Indian government has said that they will be following up on this case and be constant in their efforts to get a red corner notice issued against GS Pannu. Now, after we have understood about this, let's understand, well, now that we know the stakeholders, the players of this whole case, what explains exactly Canada's meekness, Canada's ambivalence? Why is it so afraid to take action? Well, the first one, like I told you at the beginning of this discussion, you had Terry Milevsky, a celebrated author who's written a book on Khalistan. Now, he says that the meek Canadian response to the Khalistani challenge was a frequent target of Indian politicians as far back as 1982, when Prime Minister Indira Gandhi complained about it to Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. Pierre Trudeau, the father of the current Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. So you see, this is again not a recent problem. This was already happening back in 1982. The Canadian approach has been constant. It's time now India coerced its way to get a more flexible approach from her. As per the 2021 Canadian census, Sikhs account for 2.1% of the Canadian population and are the country's fastest growing religious group, which explains probably Canada's ambivalence insofar as dealing with this problem in an efficient manner. After India, Canada is home to the largest population of Sikhs in the world. But there is a problem in this argument. What essentially Canada is guilty of is confusing two different identities. One is the Sikh diaspora. Two is the minority who believe in the Khalistan cause. Canada has conflated the two, assuming that the entire Sikh diaspora is an ardent sympathizer and supporter of the Khalistan cause. However, again, if the Canada government were to read their own newspapers, they would realize that their own newspapers report that support for the Khalistan cause is showing a declining trend, a downward trend among the Sikh diaspora in Canada. This is number one that Canada is guilty of. At the same time, Canada is also conflating two more ideas. Number one, freedom of speech, and number two is, where does freedom of speech become hate speech? Celebrating the death of a former prime minister, well, that's not freedom of speech. That foments hate in society. Canadians would do well to remember that. So is Canada wrongly and dangerously conflating the Sikh diaspora with the minority Khalistan sympathizers? One would probably argue that yes, this is an instrument, this is a factor in Canada's approach. At the same time, they are guilty of the fact that they have conflated two more arguments: the discussion between freedom of speech vis-a-vis the discussion of hate speech or hate actions. So, in conclusion, what we can essentially understand is that the Khalistan movement is not about popular support. It's actually about geopolitics. An enemy's enemy is my friend. The cardinal rule when it comes to geopolitics. Countries like China and Pakistan, well, what essentially they do is tolerate, subsidize, and then assist in various ways the Khalistan movement can survive and possibly go longer in terms of its life expectancy. Because again, this happened in the 1980s. The current generation has no living memory of these incidents. The situation in Punjab in 1980s is completely different from Punjab in 2023. There's a lot of development in the state. Situation has normalized. People are living harmoniously. However, these people who migrated outside still carry and continue to be the harbingers, the forefront of an imagined oppression that is still carried to this day. On that note, my dear audience, my dear students, we come to the end of this whole discussion, but not before I show you the two reactions that came from people in charge in Canada. The first statement coming from Chandra Arya, a member of parliament in the Canadian government. He essentially saying that, well, the Khalistan supporters have reached a new low with their actions. Very strong words coming from the Canadian member of parliament, and that the float, the tableau that celebrated the assassination, well, this is not what Canada stands for. This is not what any country should stand for. Celebrating death is not civilized. At the same time, you had Cameron Mackay, the High Commissioner of Canada in India, like I told you, expressing his profound regret, saying that he is appalled by the event in Canada that celebrated the assassination of late Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. Again, India will need to directly engage with Canada insofar as making sure that an amicable resolution is reached, that the Canadian government sees sense, that it sees realism and pragmatism, and that India cannot be coerced on some lofty ideals that only exist on paper. On that note, my dear audience, it's a wrap from all of us here at StudyIQ, but not before I inform you that for those of you again who are looking to appear for the UPSC in the year 2024, the prelims, well, if you have seen the paper in 2023, you will know it's a major pain point, especially for CSAT. 2023 will be remembered as the year of the CSAT as far as UPSC aspirants go. The whole definition of CSAT preparation has now gone completely out of the books. It has completely been blown out of water. What's enough? What's not enough? Well, to answer those questions, StudyIQ IAS English has come up with a comprehensive, scientifically enabled course purely to be delivered in English language. Classes that will cover the entire gamut of preparation, reading comprehension plus maths plus reasoning. Expect the best of faculties that you can find, individual sessions for mentorship, doubt resolution classes, everything that will enable you to be absolutely fortified to take on CSAT in the year 2024. The batch starting on June the 30th, classes every day at 3:30 p.m. If you consider joining, well, use this code and get 10,000 rupees off on the entire course fee. I hope to see many of you all there. I'm given to understand that, well, limited seats are only left. We have seen good response for this. So I would suggest that you take an informed decision and take it fast. On that note, it's a wrap. Thanks for watching. Till I see you once again at 9 p.m. IST with another such topic that catches your and my attention. Thanks for watching. Good night.